Banjo strings. Let's talk about strings for a minute here. Everyone has a different kind of string setup that they appreciate and like to use. I use GHS strings, but most string companies are mighty fine. And basically, over the years, my opinion about what strings to use for myself have evolved over time. Everyone has a different feeling for it. I like to dig in sometimes pretty hard. So I got some ideas from Sonny Osborne and Bill Keith about this, talking about how they set up their banjos with strings. And at various times talking to both of them, what they talked about having, well, before I talk about gauges, let's just say that most of you folks out there will get light gauge strings or heavy gauge or medium gauge, or you're not thinking in terms of gauges in particular, but just sort of in a general sense, okay, this is a medium set and whatnot. In the old days, I think it used to be easier just to walk into a music store and get loop end, because you want loop end to fit around the end of the tailpiece. Strings at various gauges, you'd say, okay, I want 2 011s or 1 013, whatever it might be. I think it's maybe a little harder to do that. I get my strings directly from GHS, so I just order a whole bunch of a particular gauge and do it that way. Because over time, you may want to try something different. In other words, the way Bill Keith used to have his strings, at least at one point, and Sonny Osborne would do the same thing. They'd have an 11 on the first string, 11 on the second string, and 11 on the fifth string. The same gauge for the first, second, and fifth strings. And the reason I like that, well, just to finish off the way I have my set, I have 11, 11, 13 on the third string, 22 on the fourth string, and 11 on the fifth string. So 11, 11, 13, 22, and 11 on the fifth string. So by having 11s on the outside strings, that's a slightly thicker string. I think J.D. Crowe at one point was using 9.5s, or so I understood. And these are 11s. And I had 10s for a while, but by having that slightly thicker diameter string on the first and fifth strings, when you're doing that pinch or cripple create, you get a little more resistance and you can dig in a little bit more. So when I'm playing straight ahead bluegrass, especially with my good friend Michael Daves, he really hits it hard, and it's really great to just get really up in people's faces playing hard driving bluegrass. It's nice to have that resistance there. Now in terms of the second string, some people have a 12 gauge on the second string. I have 11, which is slightly lighter because it allows me to do this 10th fret of the second string bend. It's not too loose, but it's loose enough to make it fairly easy to bend that. It's what someone asked Ralph Stanley to do that once, because he did that lick a lot and said, hey, Ralph, play that diggy diggy. So I sometimes refer to that as the diggy diggy. But by having a slightly lighter gauge second string, you can do that. In terms of the third string, I've got a 13. I used to have a 14 on the third string, but what I like to do, and what Earl did many times when he did the 2 to 3 slide on the third string, for instance with Cripple Creek, rather than just sliding 2 to 3 on the third string and getting across that second fret, he would also bend it. He would choke that note to make it a little out of tune on purpose. And it's a little easier to do that with a slightly lighter gauge string. And again, for the 3 to 2 pull off on the third string, for me, it seems to give me a slightly better snap. Also, if you do a lick like this, this is an Earl lick. And you can just play it kind of flat like that. Or you can bend it as you do it, which is what Sonny Osborne used to do, creating this incredible tension while you're playing and making it out of tune on purpose so it jumps out at you. So by having a slightly lighter, just slightly lighter third string in 013, it makes it a little easier to bend those notes. Or you can also do a hammer-on, 2 to 3 hammer-on instead of a slide. And again, slightly thicker on the outside strings for that pinch. So you can really dig it on that first string. And again, the slightly lighter second string in 11, 13, 22, 11. So those are some thoughts about strings. And in terms of changing strings, I might change mine every gig if it's an important gig, or I might let it go for a couple, 3 gigs. Don Reno once told me that he would only change strings when he broke one string. He might have his strings on for 6 months, he said, and then he would break a string, and then when that happened, he would change all the strings. I find that when the banjo no longer tunes, it's not the easiest instrument to tune anyway, but when I just find that I'm tuning it and I'm a little below the note where I want it to be, and then suddenly I get above the note and I've never actually heard the note where it's in tune, then it's time to change the strings when it really becomes really hard to tune. It's another indication. And I also find that it's easier when you're using the Keith pegs. When you have fresh strings on there, they tend to work a little bit better, and rather than having to work with them 2 or 3 times to get the notes straight, you can almost do it just the first time. So if you want more information about strings and setup and that sort of thing, plus a whole lot more, come to the Tony Trischka School of Banjo at ArtistWorks, and we'll see you soon.